to this apprentice demon. In one of the letters, Screwtape, the uncle, instructs his nephew about pleasure and reveals the fact that all of the factories of hell have never been able to produce genuine pleasure. All they can do is falsify, counterfeit, artificial pleasures and turn them into idols. But that the enemy, referring to God, is the only one who is the real author of pleasure. The Word of God reveals to us the fact that Satan is the father not of pleasure but of perversion. He does everything in his power to distort anything that might reflect the image of God. We see this in all sorts of areas in the church today. For example, spiritual gifts in the body of Christ were given to unite the body. What we see today is spiritual gifts being used to fracture the body of Christ. We see this in the area of music. Something that God has created, unity in diversity, harmony and melody, to unite our hearts in one objective, to worship the one and only true God. And what we see today are churches splitting over the style of music. It's Satan getting a handful of sand and throwing it into the machinery of the church. But we also see it in human sexuality. God created sex to be the super glue that would unite a couple, that would seal their covenant, to be repeated often as a celebration that they have forsaken all others and they now cleave one to the other. So what has Satan done? He is the master of perversion. What God created for pleasure, he perverts and he distorts and he uses sexuality against God and he uses it to create guilt and sickness and separation and distortions of the image of unity in diversity in the married couple. You have to stop drinking the coffee here. You're not going to sleep all night long. Created as a reflection of the very Godhead and a reflection of Jesus' love for the church. And now Satan distorts all of that through gender differences, homosexuality. There's not a problem in homosexuality with the sexuality part. The problem is the homo part. Meaning God created heterosexuality because it is unity and diversity, not unity and unity. That doesn't reflect God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. If you don't go back to God's purpose for human sexuality, you don't understand why he's against certain things. It's not just that he's a grumpy old man and wants to reign in the picnic of mankind in the area of sex. It's because he has a purpose for human sexuality. God is the Father of pleasure. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. He doesn't change. He is always the same. He desires pleasure. He is the inventor of human pleasure. Interesting that demons teach contrary. 1 Timothy 4 talks about some characteristics of the last days, and there's a strange one at the end. The Spirit expressly says that in later times, some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits, demons, teachings of demons, who forbid marriage. Why do demons even care? Why would they forbid marriage? Because your marriage, my marriage, was created to reflect the glory of God himself. They don't want people marrying. They don't want people staying married. They want to reflect the perversion of hell and not the pleasure of heaven. They require abstinence from foods that God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. That's why Hebrews says this. Let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous. God is the father of pleasure, not Satan. His plan is the best plan. We're following this along. We've come to the place. Open your Bible now to Song of Solomon, chapter 3, verse 5. Quick review, the photos that we've already seen. The song in 3 words. You can do it with me as you're opening your Bible. I don't know if you can do all of those things at one time. Repeat the words with me with the symbol. If you don't do it, I'm going to call you up here and you're going to sing the Guatemalan national anthem. All right? Here we go. Patience, purity, perseverance. Now we've seen the overlap of patience and purity. Time is the best friend of genuine relationships. Purity is the greatest gift before, but especially for us after marriage. Today we're going to especially focus on perseverance as being a mark of true biblical love. 1 Corinthians 13. Real love never fails. And now we all fail. Because apart from the love of God who first loved us, none of us can love biblically. And if you want to find out how much you don't know how to love, we get married. Greatest lesson. And you want to double dose, then have children. And if you just, I'm going to say it. If you want to find out what a real jerk you are, have 6 kids. Because each one is a double, triple, quadruple, I don't know what comes after that, dose of 5. Who said 5? Did you say 5?
I said a lot.
Oh, a lot. We saw about the seasons of love. Every relationship goes through spring and summer and autumn and winter. And we saw this couple did that as well. True love grows through the seasons of life. We saw the DNA of love as each one grows in the appreciation for the other. I was talking to someone last night, and I tried to one-up him, but he said, as time goes on, that list of qualities that he appreciated in his first love has only grown and doubled. I said, well, yeah, well, mine tripled. That was good, right? You like that? He did say that. So she expresses her appreciation. He does, then she does, then he does. That's the DNA of a godly relationship. Not magnifying the faults, but praising God for the virtues. Godly relationships grow through patience and affirmations of other-centered love. I was corrected last night. I should not say that women are verbal animals. They are verbal creatures. I don't know if that's better or not, but that's what 2 people told me that last night. So we're going to go with creatures. We as men have to learn, and all of us need to express that. And then we finished last night with the beloved released from the barn after a long winter, and he's bounding on the hills, and he can't wait to see her, but there are threats and dangers. These periods of concentration, of confirmation, of solidification of our relationship. And then periods of growth, and then periods that maybe seem a little bit more stagnant. But we have 2 threats. One is little foxes that threaten the doves. And as men, God has called us, and we'll see that again today, to be protectors. Everything in our unisex society, which is neutering men and women, has turned men into something. I can't say most of the words that are coming to mind. And women into superheroes. Women need to learn to allow men to be their protectors, and we as men need to learn to step up to the plate and protect against little foxes. But the other threat to love, and then that key refrain, my beloved is mine, and I am his little foxes. But the other threat is separation, and we finished last night talking about what seems to be a dream. And once again, he's gone, and she can't take it anymore, and she wants to cling to him with everything she has. But at that point, that incredible desire leads to the repetition of the refrain of patience. I ask you to swear, daughters of Jerusalem, by all of those animals that are so easily startled. Don't awaken love. Don't rush it until God elects, until it's time. There's a song, it's the only one that I've actually found. I have one that was composed for my messages in Portuguese, but you wouldn't understand any of it, so it wouldn't do us any good. But that Michael Card, who I mentioned the other night that I like, sings about the Song of Solomon. It's about the text we just saw, and it's also refers to some of the key verses. And I'd just like to play it for us tonight. You can catch that on YouTube. Michael Card, Arise My Love. Well, the time finally has come. Well, I don't know why that's going to go again, but chapter 3, verse 6, all the way to 5:1 describes two events. The wedding processional and the consummation of the wedding. We're going to look at both. Every wedding is a coronation of a king and a queen. The text will actually teach that. Every wedding ceremony is unique. I was thinking back of the weddings, both mine as well as our children. This was many years ago when I had hair. My wife looks exactly the same. When her father married us on a little island with a moat around it that I had placed crocodiles so that my wife would not escape on that day at Word of Life, behind the Word of Life Inn, almost 39 years ago. Our son David, who was here some weeks ago, and Adriana, when they were just little kids, they had 1,100 people come to their wedding ceremony. Because Adriana's mom does this for a living, and everybody wanted to see what kind of a wedding is she going to put on for her daughter. Shelley, I had the privilege, like God, in Genesis chapter 2, of not only bringing her in and delivering her to the gorilla, to my son-in-law, but then taking the mic and performing the ceremony itself. Our son Daniel was married before 90 people or so in a golf course in Colorado. And then Stephen and Hannah married on the farm, and for a whole week, both of our families worked together to put together all of the details and stuff that I think's been used in several weddings after. In fact, was yours too, for Luke. So each one having its own special events, aspects, and then the last one, Kayla, our youngest, who was married at the same place where David was, but not with 1,100 people, but she did come in a VW hippie bus. I drove her down because we drove one of those for 19 years. And what we didn't expect as I came down to the place of the wedding, honking that horn, that my boys would start crying, including your pastor. And David, yes, you did. Weeping like little babies, remembering all of those horrible trips. We drove literally to the Amazon in that car, 4 days and 4 nights of driving. Just like in Genesis, when we come to the Song of Solomon, the climax and the exact center of the book is a wedding ceremony. That's how Genesis chapter 2 ends all of the narrative of creation. And we already mentioned our...
Oh. He's trying to fix it. That thing keeps...
You just shut the internet at the bottom.
I did.
Okay. So... Huh. That's still there. Boy, we were going so well tonight. Okay. We good?
I think so.
Except for that thing that's still there. Okay. The exact center of the book is the consummation of the marriage of the two whose very names are a reflection of one another. The wedding procession is the first part, and the focus is actually the arrival of the groom. Just like we get stories in the New Testament about the church, and then we sang that tonight, waiting for Jesus to come back at a time we don't know. So we have the parable of the 10 virgins, and in John chapter 14, Jesus says, I go to prepare a place for you. It's like the bridegroom preparing the nuptial apartment for his bride. He's doing that for us now. He actually did it at the cross and is there awaiting the day that he comes back. With Solomon, he spared no expense to make this day the most special day in both of their lives. Here's what it says, chapter 3, verse 6 through 8. What is that? Coming up from the wilderness like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the fragrant powders of a merchant? I'll know the answer. It is the litter. That's probably not the best word. It's a sedan, an elevated throne that's being carried either by chariots or actually by warriors. Solomon is coming. He's coming from southern Israel, Judah, up through to the north to Israel. It's presented as though he passed through. Remember that duty-free perfume shop, and he got all of the perfumes he could possibly get, and they're making a huge cloud, and she's seeing this. It's the day. The wedding day has arrived. Around it, his elevated throne, are 60 mighty men, literally warriors. Some of the mighty men of Israel, all of them wearing swords, and expert in war, each with his sword at his thigh. Usually for a right-handed person, the sword would be on the left thigh, so that they could quickly remove it. Actually, we have stories in Judges about a left-handed guy, Ehud, who had it on the other side and it kind of stuck it in the belly of the king, but that's another story. And they're prepared for the terrors by night. Here's what I think the passage is actually reflecting for us. He spared no expense to protect her, to secure her. He's got 60 of the mighty men of Israel to make sure that nothing happens to his bride. Well, I can tell you, if some terrorist barged through that door with a machine gun and pointed it at my wife, I would be the first one to jump up and throw Billy in front of him. If I could.
Rosemary would beat you with her rings.
Why 60 men? Why 60 groomsmen? We mentioned before that our son is a major in the Air Force, and he's in charge of security forces. It's actually the biggest portion of the Air Force. For a time, he was stationed on a base that houses all of the B-2 bombers in the world. Stealth bombers. Nuclear bombers. His job was just to protect them. To command those guys to protect the world. When I hear about 60 mighty warriors and their culture, that's what I think about. Except that the B-2 in the life of Solomon was Shulamite. Those things cost billions of dollars. And she was priceless to him. But not just that. Oh, excuse me. Skip this. How you love your wife, biblically, if you're a married man, is the most important thing you do. That is your first stewardship. You are her protector. She is worth everything to you. The second thing is the elegance in preparation for the wedding day. Here's a difficult area for us. I think the Song of Solomon says a few things, speaks to this. Ostentatiousness in weddings. But on the other side, what seems to be even more common, more and more in our culture and in the world, is treating weddings and ceremonies as though they're nothing special. It's just another day. In a day when people live together, most do before they get married. What's so special about the wedding day? Why spend all that money? And I'm definitely against spending your life savings for a one-day party. But biblically, we notice this is coronation day. Outside of your conversion, this is probably the most important event in your lives. And somehow in the church, we need to maintain that balance. Now, this is also a royal wedding, and so it's appropriate, the preparation that was made. Look at verse 9. King Solomon made himself a carriage from the wood of Lebanon. From this moment on, we're going to see Lebanon coming in a lot. That's where she's from. It seems like he did everything to make her comfortable, surround her, because he's taken her away from mama. Taken her from the country to the palace to a setting that she doesn't know, but he's going to do everything he can to make her comfortable. It's interesting. On a side note, Deuteronomy 24, verse 5. In the context of divorce in Israel and how to avoid it, says that a married man should spend the first year of his marriage promoting the happiness of his wife. Kind of an obscure text that would pass off. The women should love this. And in a patriarchal culture, at least, when he's taking her away from everything she knows and holds dear and moving her into his father's household, he's got a job, and that job is to make her the happiest woman on the face of the earth for the first year. He should not take on extra responsibilities. He does his work, and he cares for his wife, and they establish a solid foundation. This is really good counsel for our kids. Don't take on 2-3 jobs to pay for an ostentatious wedding in the first year of your marriage. You're just preparing for disaster. He made its posts of silver, verse 10, its back of gold, its seat of purple. Very expensive. He spared no expense. Its interior was inlaid with love by the daughters of Jerusalem. Remember, those were the competitors in the beginning. But other people are also blessed. Go out, O daughters of Zion, and look upon King Solomon with the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, on the day of the gladness of his heart. He becomes king, she becomes queen, and they lived happily ever after. Every marriage is a crowning. I think of royal weddings that garner so much attention. A lot of pomp and circumstance. We mentioned the crown last night, and you get to see a lot of that. But we get, in the story of Solomon and the Shulamite woman, the paradigm for all of our weddings. Love inspires our best for the beloved. It's interesting, Proverbs 31 that talks about the virtuous woman makes that clear. She cares for her husband. She cares for her household. They're dressed in scarlet. And she also gives to the needy. The couple's relationship, as we read in this text, is a blessing for everyone around. It gets me very concerned when two young people start dating. Their parents are against it. They shouldn't be dating anyway. Their friends, and you really changed since you started dating so-and-so. Nobody's really in favor of it. It's a disaster waiting to happen. A godly relationship, and one of the things we recommend to couples in Brazil, the absolute best place for our kids to find their future spouse is in the context not of miniature golf, pizza, balls, but ministry. If the nature of our relationship is each for the other and both for God, if this is an equal yoke, the yoke being that bond that holds oxen together to plow the fields, if we're a team, the best place to discover his heart is when you work together in the nursery with snotty, runny-nosed kids on your lap. How does he respond? How does she deal with that? Missions trips. It's 105 degrees and 90% humidity. You really find out about people in the context of serving others. Their relationship was a blessing, but relationships are to be a blessing. That's why we're together. And the other lesson we get from here, a husband's love requires that he protect his wife. Adam did not do that. We saw that several years ago when we studied biblical foundations for the husband-wife relationship. When Adam is the one who sang in poetry to his wife, "You are bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Nothing will ever separate us." The next thing he says to her, or to God, "It was the woman that you gave me." Effectively exposing her to instant death on the part of God. He does all that to save himself. He's a liar, a self-protector. But in Christ, all of that changes. And men become protectors of their families and their wives. 1 Peter 3 tells men to study their wives, to live the common life as married partners, arm in arm, walking through the adventures and the difficulties and the storms of life. It's a tragedy when the one who is called to be the biggest protector of his wife is the very one who abuses her in multiple ways. Verbally, physically, emotionally, and sexually. In every one of those arenas, husbands, love your wives. When we see 60 warriors protecting the B-2 bomber of his day. I probably shouldn't say that, but his wife. We get a lesson for our lives as well. Well, that takes us to chapter 4. Here's the wedding. It's actually the wedding night. The focus in the text actually is on the consummation of the marriage, not the vows that are assumed and sealed before the witnesses. It's not so much the ceremony, which probably wasn't that big of a deal. As the procession arrives in Jerusalem, the vows are exchanged and they go into the nuptial tent, and now he speaks. Once again, the groom takes the lead at this strategic moment, and he praises the beauty of his bride. There are 7 descriptions from the crown of her head working his way down. The next time that he does this, when there is the necessity of ministering forgiveness, he starts at the bottom of her feet and works his way up. I'm not exactly sure why, but he does it. Behold, in the darkness of the nuptial tent, as they're about to consummate their relationship, he speaks to her. You are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. He said this 2 times to her earlier. Of the 9 times in the book, he now starts to describe, your eyes are doves. They transmit peace. It's not just appearance, but tranquility, character behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats leaping down the slopes of Gilead. Again, don't try that one. But the idea is a hypnotic, wavy effect as the goats are returning from their pasture in the highlands to the meadows, and the sun gleams off of that black wool. It was hypnotic to him. Then he says this, your teeth are like a flock of shorn ewes that have come up from the washing, all of which bear twins. Not one of them has lost its young. Her mom and dad spent a lot of money at the orthodontist. She has all of her teeth. They're gleaming white, but they also make him laugh. Because what happens when you shear sheep and you take them down to the river to wash off all the excess dirt and wool, and when you wash your dog or your cat, if you dare do so, you know what happens. You got that hose in there, you rub the shampoo in, and the dog's shivering like this until you step away. And then what happens? Just like that. And what happens? You laugh. You get out of the way first. I think that's what he's saying. He says, you make me laugh. I love to make my wife laugh. He made her laugh. Your lips are like a scarlet thread. Your mouth is lovely. Your cheeks are like halves of a pomegranate. It's got that reddish glow. It's a natural, non-fake, cosmetized glow behind your veil. Your neck is like the Tower of David. It's not that she was a giraffe, but the neck in Israel, for example, the people of Israel were a stiff-necked people. It's their character. She was noble in her bearing. On it hang 1,000 shields, all of them shields of warriors. We're going to skip to verse 6. Just kidding. Got to do it. It's in the Bible. He talks about her breasts, but not the format. They don't look like baby deer. That would be really weird. But just like a little puppy. You want to pet it. And that's what he's saying. Sorry. Your 2 breasts are like 2 fawns. Is that recorded? You've been waiting for this. Perfectly shaped, twins of a gazelle that graze among the lilies. Gentle, affectionate, tender, caresses. This is their wedding night. And all these things he's saying, it's not flattery. It's genuine appreciation both of character and nobility of beauty. Until the day breathes and the shadows flee. Now here's the amazing thing in this passage. In verse 6, when he says, I will go away to the mountain of myrrh and the hill of frankincense, and he's referring to her breasts. It's the only time in the whole passage that he talks in the first person singular. This is really amazing. That is other-centered sex. He's totally focused on pleasing her. Genuine praise. And the only time he talks about himself is when he says, I will go away. I will consummate with you. And then he starts up all over again. You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you. Ah, come on. They didn't have Photoshop back then. And she's already said, by the standards of her day, she is far less than perfect. The whole point is beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. He only has eyes for her. I think there's an old Frank Sinatra song, somebody saying it, that says that. Now, verse 8 starts something that's a little bit confusing, perhaps, for us. Because based on the context, they've already made it back to Jerusalem. They're in the wedding tent on the first day of a 7-day party in which it will be announced that the relationship has been consummated. They are now his husband and wife. And they spend the rest of the 6 days celebrating with their friends. But he says this to her in verse 8. Come with me from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Depart from the peak of Amana, from the peak of Sinir and Hermon. These are mountains in the northern parts of Israel, near her home, from the dens of lions, from the mountains of leopards. What's he talking about? He's talking about fear, loneliness. She's there physically, but he wants her to be there in every sense of the term. If any part of her is afraid of the lions and the leopards, and if any part of her is thinking about her childhood home, he calls her back to him and he starts up again. Just a few applications. Men must affirm their love and appreciation for the beauty and character of their wife, not just when they say, I love you on the wedding night, but throughout their marriage. The focus of each spouse is the other. Christ-centeredness manifests itself in others-centeredness. Everything in this text suggests that these two are becoming one. It's the team again. One of the marriage formulas that we share with young people in Brazil, which has to do with the equal yoke. If marriage is all about reflecting the glory of God and serving others as a team, then 1 + 1 to justify our marriage should be greater than 2. Together, we should be able to serve God better, further, farther. Bill, are you liking this?
No, I just told her that I was donkey, but then I looked at the cow and I was like, oh.
They're not a cow. It's an ox.
I'm from Philly. It's all.
I know. Yeah, I'm from there too, sort of. So at least you didn't say it was a deer. We're working together. Ecclesiastes says if two are walking together at once, that was quick. You were good that time. If one is cold, she's always cold. The other, together, we're better. When two people are serving two masters, we're not going to get anywhere. They become one, a team. So he praises her purity. Verse 9, chapter 4. He says this, you have captivated my heart, my sister. Yuck. Remember when your dad made you kiss your sister because you had a big fight or something like that? That's horrible, but that was the most endearing relationship in the day. My bride, you have captivated my heart. With one glance of your eyes, she melted him. With one jewel of your necklace, she left a pearl on the sink. And he, it took his breath away. How beautiful is your love, my sister, my bride. How much better is your love than wine. This is the word caresses. And it's the same phrase we already saw as the book opened. And the fragrance of your oils or perfume than any spice. Your lips drip nectar, my bride, honey and milk. Oh, there's the promised land again. are under your tongue. The fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon. He is overwhelmed in all of his senses by this incredible gift, not from the devil who perverts pleasure, but from the author of sex itself. And then he exalts her virginity. A garden locked is my sister, my bride, a spring locked, a fountain sealed. The end of the book is going to talk about that. Her brothers were part of the team that protected her. They say, we have a little sister who has no breasts. What shall we do for our sister in the day when she is spoken for? If she's a door that opens up to anybody, we'll brick her in. But if she's a tower, we'll honor her with silver. The family's involved in this. Counselors, leaders, and pastors. Your shoots are an orchard of pomegranates with all choicest fruits. Hannah with nard. Now he's going to go back through the duty free again. She's the Chanel number 5. What do you say? Is that right? Chanel number 5. Did they do that anymore? Does that exist? That's really old. He just lists a whole bunch of stuff. Nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with trees of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, with all choice spices. And then he goes back to that watery imagery. Proverbs does the same thing. Solomon in Proverbs describes sexual pleasure when he says that the best way for you to avoid temptation is to satisfy yourself with the fountains of your wife or husband. A garden fountain, that's a little well, a well of living water. And then he progresses to flowing streams from Lebanon. In Proverbs 5:15-19, he says the same thing. He starts small and gets bigger and bigger. And what he's basically saying is, she's a tsunami of pleasure, and it's all for me. This woman can satisfy an army of men. And she saved herself just for me. And he's blown away by that fact, and he exalts her virginity. At that point, she speaks. She's been quiet for a long time. He has assured her of his love. And she responds with those verses we read the first night. Awake. It's time for love to awaken. It's all the more special because of their patience and purity. O north wind, and come, O south wind. Remember, from the Mediterranean brought storms, from the east brought arid, desert-like dust storms, but from the north and south, refreshing air. Blow upon my garden. Let its spices flow. Let my beloved come, and now she switches, and here's the key transition in the book, to his garden and eat its choicest fruits. He responds, the relationship is consummated. Unfortunately, we have a division chapter in our Bibles, but he says, I came to my garden. I am my beloved's. My beloved is mine. My sister, my bride. I gathered my myrrh and my spice. I ate my honeycomb with my honey. I drank my wine with my milk. It's an expression of complete satisfaction, gratitude, purity. This is what it should look like. The church needs to talk to our young people in biblical terms about what God offers. We don't have to explain everything that's wrong with all of the sexual perversions in our world. We just need to exalt the truth. It said that in days gone by, the FBI, which is responsible for protecting all of the dollars, the notes that circulate in the world, 90% of all dollars circulate outside of the United States. That's a hard job to protect from counterfeiting. Now today it's probably all done digitally, microscopes and everything else, but as I understand it, in past days, FBI agents were trained not by studying every possible counterfeit, but by knowing the original. And the more you know the original, the false just looks cheap. It looks like 3-day-old popcorn. And now, a mysterious voice blesses the couple and encourages them in their love. The ESV says others. That's really weird. I really don't think that there's a chorus of people sitting outside the tent waiting, encouraging, let's go, 1, 2, 3, let's go. I really don't think it's the wind that was addressed in the third person. Taking our clue from Genesis, and God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The only legitimate conclusion that I come to in light of a biblical perspective of God as the author of pleasure is that it's God himself. And he says to the couple in their marriage bed, eat, friends, drink, be intoxicated with love. Amen. She gives him the gift of purity. As parents, we need to be the guardians of our children's hearts. They each express gratitude, the other-centeredness, which the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 7 gives us as practically the only secret to sexual satisfaction in all the Bible. Think more about the other than yourself. That's what Jesus did. And as we sang before, we understand in light of the Bible that every human marriage ultimately points to the marriage, the wedding feast of the Lamb. That's why we protect our marriages. Ours, our children's, with everything we have. It's the most precious thing we have outside of our salvation. We're going to take 10 minutes. It's exactly 7 o'clock. And we're going to see, unfortunately, what happens in every marriage. Conflict, disagreement, the routine of years which destroys the romantic. All of that and much more right here. Then, just write him an email and you can send it on if there's something that you wanted to write down. And you could not very small. All right, we talked about, help me out here, everyone. 1, 2, 3. Patience and purity. Now we come to the second half of the book moves quickly. I've actually taught the whole book in 60 minutes. We have 49 minutes here. And I don't know how far we're going to get because I don't want to rush too fast and I want to talk about the lessons, but we're not in that bad a shape. An experience that I like to share, especially with younger couples, especially with those who are looking to marry, has to do with some palm trees, not these exact ones, but in a shopping mall about an hour from our home. And we were there with our other son and with some of his children at the food plaza and some of the entertainment, amusement park stuff as well. And I wound up watching the kids doing something, and I was seated next to a palm tree planted in a pot that was probably about that deep, and it was perfect. I mentioned my parents were florists for like 10 years. I know what a nice plant looks like. Now, my wife later told me that it was actually artificial, so I guess I don't know as much as I do. However, imagining that it was real and admiring, thinking, there's somebody that comes along and waters this palm tree, fertilizes this palm tree, trims anything that isn't just right on this palm tree. And a lot of people, a lot of young people, those who still get married, that's what they want. They want their relationship to be like a palm tree planted in a mall. No storms, no adverse winds, no hail, no problems. That's just not the case. Our marriages are more like this. And they need to know that. I would much rather be a palm tree at the edge of the sea, taking on hurricanes, 120-mile-an-hour winds, hail, and everything else that the world can throw at us. But sinking our roots deep in the soil of grace and allowing the roots of our trees planted together to intertwine in such a way that even though we have a lot of scars, a lot of adventures, we're doing it together and rooted in God's grace. I'd much rather that kind of a relationship than that one. The second half of this book is about persevering in life's storms. Conflict and confrontation that it often creates can serve as the best tools to produce the image of Christ in us. Although all of this started because of sin, God in His infinite grace, wisdom, and sovereignty is able to transform life's storms into opportunities to produce the image of Christ in us. I didn't understand that for probably the first 10 years of our marriage. I just wanted someone to rubber stamp my wonderful decisions. I didn't want someone pointing out the areas in my life where I was selfish, pig-headed, stubborn. Only grace liberated me to drop the masks and allow some of those things to come from my greatest ally, my best friend, and be used as a chisel to take off some of the things that didn't look like Jesus. We believe with all of our hearts that any couple rooted in God's grace that know Christ and allow Him to build their home can emerge from crises, conflicts, horrible situations better, not because of the situation, but because they dealt with it biblically. Through forgiveness, destroying bitterness, and growing as a couple. And that's exactly what happens in this passage. Look at chapter 5, verse 2. We left the couple and really couldn't get any better. They had the perfect honeymoon. But all of a sudden, some time has passed. We come to another page in the album. And she speaks. Chapter 5, verses 2 through 8 describe apathetic love, indifference, lethargy, the routine that destroys the romantic. It happens in all of our relationships. The first time that you held her hand, it was like 110 shock. 110 volts or watts or whatever it is. The first kiss was 220. And I stopped right there. Forget 330, 440, and 550. But love matures. It deepens, it grows, but it can also atrophy. Here's what she says. I slept, but my heart was awake. The idea, I think, is she was in that twilight zone. You're not sure if you're fully asleep or if you're awake until something happens. And then you realize I was probably asleep. A sound. My beloved is knocking. Now he speaks from a distance. Now if I had really prepared this well, like Stephen did for the first message in Jonah, I'd have different ones of you coming in. I'd probably get Nate to do this. Open to me, my sister, my love. This is God speaking. I love that sermon. That was great. Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. Do you realize in no other place in the book does he pile on so many epithets, so many words of endearment, of praise to her? Nothing has changed for him. His love is on fire. Now he explains, we have to read between the lines, but it's not that difficult. My head is wet with dew, my locks with the drops of the night. Well, when does that happen? When you get dewy? He's been out in the fields, he's been traveling, he's been out for a while, enough so that the dew has accumulated on his head like grass. He's been looking forward to this. He's sacrificed. He probably caught that earlier flight, an earlier bus. He did whatever he had to do. He's going to surprise her. He even brings a gift. We'll see that in a moment. But she responds. And the contrast is amazing. It's kind of like what we've been seeing in the book of Jonah, those ironies. I put off my garment. How could I put it on? I already washed my feet. I put lotion on them. They're all soft right now. I'm not going to touch that cold floor. How could I soil them? That's her response. Total contrast. Apathy, indifference. She's forgotten the very reason why she does all of the beauty treatments at night. It's not for anybody else. It's supposed to be for him. And then she relates what he did next. My beloved put his hand to the latch, and my heart was thrilled within me. Things are starting to change. She's actually repenting now. Probably, as in many royal palaces, even to this day, the king and the queen have separate sleeping quarters. So he's come to her room, and probably this lattice thing is a bar to protect her, to keep intruders out. But he has some kind of an access, and he probably knows where the key is, and he's reaching it, but he can't lift it up. He cannot get in. He's even doing that in consideration of her, so that she doesn't have to put her dainty little feet on the floor. And now her heart was thrilled within me. I arose to open to my beloved. She's repented, changed her mind. And when she finally gets to the doorknob, it's dripping with myrrh, perfume. He picked it up at the duty-free on the way out of the airport. My fingers with liquid perfume on the handles of the bolt. Finally, she gets the door open. I open to my beloved, but he had turned and gone. Now, the danger here is he had other options. He's the king. First off, he could have put to use his karate lesson. Boom, and he's there. He could have banged the door, sulked away, and gone online. And found satisfaction that way. Or he could have gone after some of the virgins in the palace. We'll find out that's not what he did. It's interesting that Colossians chapter 3, verse 19 says, husbands, love your wives and do not treat them with bitterness. One of the principal areas where husbands treat their wives with bitterness is when their fragile male ego is rejected sexually. I do that without even knowing it. My wife perceives it as just a sharpness in tone, a lack of affection. Sorry, Steve. Don't want to embarrass you. Actually, I don't care. But then she says, my soul failed me when he spoke. I sought him but found him not. I called him but he gave no answer. Now we go back it kind of reminds us, it definitely reminds us of that other scene where there was kind of a dreamy, nightmarish type of scene, but things are different this time. She goes out to the street, she's got to find him and tell him she's sorry. The watchman found me as they went about in the city. But this time, their marital conflict, her indifference, is dangerous. Others won't understand it. They beat me, they bruised me, they took away my veil. They probably thought she was a woman of the night, prowling the streets at 4 a.m. They took away my veil, those watchmen of the walls, and now she cries out again for help. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him, I am sick with love. Ever since Genesis 3, when God pronounced discipline on the couple and said, your desire shall be against your husband, the best translation, and he shall rule over you, conflict has characterized every relationship. No couple is ready to marry that does not know how to resolve conflicts biblically. And we're going to see that here tonight, and we need to teach this, and we need to practice this. We cannot have as our philosophy of marriage if two people, well, we should have, if two people always agree, one of them is necessary. There are going to be disagreements. One of the biggest areas for us is in purchases. I like to spend money. My wife likes to save money. That's why she takes care of our finances. So I come home and say, honey, let's take all the kids and let's go out for pizza. I said, we can't. What do you mean we can't? What'd you do with all of our money? We don't have that. And I'd say to her, do you know how many women wish they had a husband that would come home and offer to just sweep her off her feet and take off her pizza? She'd probably think one less than you think. How are they going to resolve this problem? At this point, he becomes the hero. At other moments, perhaps not, but she now cries out for help. And this group of women, the others, challenge her with these words. And you've probably heard something like this. Here's what they say to her. What is your beloved more than another beloved? O most beautiful among women. Remember I said that phrase is only used by them 2 other times. That you thus adjure us. What they're basically saying, these mature other women, forgetting. Men are all alike. They only want one thing. He'll get over it. That challenge incites her to think about how he is different. Look at verses 10 through 16. Here's how she responds. Everything that she was not thinking on that night when he arrived, she's now reminded of, repents of, and renews her love. She is forced to recall what attracted her to him in the first place. Just like the Ephesian church, she has to remember and repent and renew her works. Listen to how she describes this guy. My beloved is radiant and ruddy, his complexion. Distinguished among 10,000, O women of Jerusalem. His head is the finest gold. His locks are wavy, black as a raven. She begins 10 descriptions, both of his character and his appearance. We know he wasn't perfect. But just like her, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Absence made the heart grow fonder. His eyes are doves, literally. He also transmitted peace. beside streams of water, bathed in milk. He didn't have those yellowish, red, bloodshot eyes that you see some people have. You know they're sick, they got something. Get away. Sitting beside a full pool, his cheeks, or maybe his beard, like beds of spices, mounds of sweet-smelling herbs. His lips are lilies, dripping liquid myrrh. The idea isn't just the appearance, but the speech, which reveals the heart. His arms are rods of gold. I mean, the guy could do 35 pull-ups without stopping. Doesn't say, that's it, that's in the Hebrew. Set with jewels. His body is polished ivory, bedecked with sapphires. He's got a six-pack. His legs are alabaster columns set on bases of gold. He looks like an offensive lineman. His legs. I don't look at offensive linemen's legs. I'm just guessing that that's what they would look like. His appearance is like Lebanon. That's what she knew and she loved. Choice as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet. And he is altogether desirable. Whoa. That's not what you were thinking 3 hours ago. But she is now. This is my beloved. And this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. She was challenged. And now she praises the beloved. We mentioned last night, the renewal of love requires a positive and not a negative focus. Casting blame is the devil's game. Anybody can accuse. That's what God said would happen as a result of the fall. Your desire will be against your husband, and he will oppress you. In Christ, we need a reversal of what is normal. We need something supernatural in our relationships. The remembrance of that which attracted us to the other in the beginning is the first step toward the renewal of our love, just like the Ephesian church. Now, after that discourse, chapter 5, verse 16, this is my beloved, this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem, leads us to a new rendezvous. Chapter 6, this is phenomenal. I love this response because her praise of her husband influenced the way he was viewed by those around him. I call that holy gossip. Holy gossip. It's when you say good things behind the back of other people, hoping that they'll get back to them. So like I could say, I watched your son's messages several weeks ago. That was phenomenal. It's amazing how Stephen and Billy compliment each other. And so now Mom, 2 days later, Pastor Merck said that your message was absolutely phenomenal. That's holy gossip. When other people...
2 minutes.
2 minutes later.
You're still talking.
Really, that's what you said. I'm being sincere. I love watching Stephen, all three of you guys, and others, and Dr. Sayer also, and it's great. This church is a family. That's what I love about this. We've been teaching that for years. The church is not a club; it's a family. But look how her words about him influenced those more mature women. They respond asking her, where is your beloved gone? Oh, most beautiful among women. Where is your beloved turned that we can seek him with you? After that description, who wouldn't want to find this guy? She's turned their world upside down. It's a horrible thing when spouses gossip about their own spouse or their own children to third parties. We should be their biggest promoters. And so we wind up tearing down our spouse, complaining about her or him to others. You women especially have an incredible power to influence other people's opinions and perspective on your husband. You can make or break your own. Proverbs 14 says that. A foolish woman with her own hands or with her own words tears down her home. And men can do the same thing. We don't need pajama nights in our churches where all the women gather and they play table games and they talk. My wife used to go to them in our church in Brazil. And she'd come home and say, Dave, all they do is just talk evil about their husbands. I'm not going to go back. Well, why not? Because she said, I don't have anything to say. Actually, she didn't say that. I just didn't. So they ask, where has he gone? And she responds, because it sounds like she knows. He's got a favorite spot. It's not a hidden computer, video game, pornography. It's a garden. Some people think that they're already having a new consummation of their relationship. That's going to come, but not now. My beloved has gone down to his garden, to the bed of spices, to graze in the gardens and to gather lilies. She describes a place. He went to recompose himself, to get himself in order. All of that passion, there's a lot of cold water thrown on him. And he knows he's got to respond the right way. And now she says something that she should have thought about earlier. It's the second time the refrain of exclusivity is uttered. I am my beloved's. That's where the change comes. And my beloved is mine. He grazes among the lilies. The first time she said, my beloved is mine, little foxes, and I am my beloved's. But now she talks about the fact she belongs to him, and he also belongs to her. She's starting to get it. Verses 4 through 10, they're back together again. Another photo in the album. Now here's what I would have expected. She shows up in the garden. He's got this little discourse with her. I took you from the vineyards. Your hands were calloused. Your face was burned. Your half-brothers didn't treat you with respect. I brought you to the palace. I gave you the life of a damsel, of a queen. And this is what I get? But instead, he practices Proverbs 15:1. Proverbs 15:1 says this. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. In a moment, I'm going to ask my wife to give an illustration, share something we saw that was absolutely amazing in this. But listen to what he says to her now. You are beautiful as Tirzah, my love. Tirzah would become the capital of the north, a beautiful city. Lovely as Jerusalem, the capital of the south. Awesome as an army with banners. I think once again of Lord of the Rings. And these amazing armies that are approaching one another. She's awe-inspiring. He says, turn away for your eyes from me, for they overwhelm me. It's almost like, I've got this discourse. I've been here in the garden preparing these thoughts. Don't look at me because I'm going to melt. I can't do this if you keep looking at me like that. And look what he says. Your hair is like a flock of goats. Well, probably could have done better than that. But he says the same thing he said earlier. Nothing has changed. It's hypnotic. Leaping down the slopes of Gilead, your teeth are like a flock of ewes that have come up from the washing. All of them bear twins. Not one among them has lost its young. Your cheeks are like halves of a pomegranate behind your veil. He already said all that, but notice, different than the wedding night, he takes out all of the sensual references. There's nothing about her lips. There's nothing about her tongue. There's nothing about her breasts. What he's saying to her is, I love you for who you are, not just for what you give me. He's not like all the other men. The next verse is a little bit hard. Because he says there are 60 queens and 80 concubines hanging around the palace. These 60 queens could very well be the wives of those mighty warriors, because there are also 60 of them. The concubines, I don't know. Harem, some would say that this is later on in his life. It's possible. Virgins without number. There's a lot of women in this palace. My dove, my perfect one, is the only one of her mother, pure to her who bore her. The young women saw her and called her blessed, the queens and concubines also, and they praised her. This sounds a lot like Proverbs 31, the virtuous woman. Many women have been virtuous, but you surpass them all. He probably wrote that too. Verse 10, who is this who looks down like the dawn, beautiful as the moon, bright as the sun, awesome as an army with banners? He finishes his discourse. All he has is praise for her. He could have said, you owe me. I mentioned Proverbs 51. Carlson, can you just share? I think this could be helpful for a lot of people here. If I could leave one verse with you, together with Ephesians 4:26, be angry and sin not. Do not let the sun go down upon your wrath. Don't give a space to the devil in your relationship. But what comes before that is probably Proverbs 15:1. If I could recommend one verse for every couple to memorize and practice the next time, and it could be tonight on the way home, that there is conflict, it would be Proverbs 15:1.
We received a visit from an older couple, and the man was somewhat difficult. He was cantankerous. You know, everything was a big deal. And so he had told his wife something or asked her to do something, I don't know what it was, and he asked her about it and she had forgotten. So you could see the pressure rising and you could tell that she was about to get an earful. But she just looked at him very calmly and said, my dear, you tell me so many wonderful things, I can't possibly remember them all. And he just wilted. I mean, I stood there like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because in my mind I was thinking, grow up, you know what, really? You're going to make a big deal out of this? And yet she, in the best way, just handled it, and he wilted, and that was it. It was the end of it. It's like Proverbs 15:1.
It takes two, and he's a model at this point. In spite of the fractured ego, he chooses the high road. Does not let the sun go down upon his wrath. Does not treat her with bitterness or harsh words. In between lines, her approach to him, the appeal to the friends and to the watchmen and everybody around, is an expression of forgiveness, a desire for forgiveness. And so reconciliation is taking place as she approaches him, and he bathes her with these gentle words. But it's so hard, especially for us men, to pronounce those words. Will you forgive me? I don't know if it's a genetic defect that comes with the Y chromosome. I'd be tempted to have us trained. It's possible that some of you women have never heard your husband say those words. And I know it's not because he never made a mistake or sinned against you. Forgiveness is the only hope that couples have, families have. Because we're all sinners, and sinners sin. Hunters hunt, fishermen fish, and sinners sin. It's what we do. And these porcupines in the same den hurt each other. The next time then, you have a chance to give a soft answer or to ask forgiveness, it'll blow your wife away. Probably like this. So we come to the point, actually going back a little bit. These are some of the hardest verses in the whole book. So I'm just going to pretend they're not here and go straight. No, I'm not going to do that. Verses 11 through 13. Something really interesting happens here. She now meets him at the nut orchard, this garden. I went down to the nut orchard, actually this is probably a different place, to look at the blossoms of the valley, to see whether the vines had budded, whether the pomegranates were in bloom. She wants to see if spring has come back in their relationship again. Before I was aware, my desire set me among the chariots of my kinsman, a prince. And most of your Bibles probably have other people say, return, return, O Shulamite, return, return, that we may look upon you. Why should you look upon the Shulamite as upon a dance between two armies? These are really hard verses. They're some of the hardest verses in the whole Old Testament to translate. It sounds like what's happening is he swoops her up in his arms on his favorite chariot. They go for a run around the city of Jerusalem. There are crowds of people watching, calling for her to come back. And he says, hey, I am my beloved is mine, take your eyes off. Because he speaks to a group in the second person plural masculine. Why should you, men, look upon the Shulamite as upon a dance between two armies? It's like this is a feast for your eyes. She's mine. All of that to say that what's most significant in these verses is this is the first time she's identified with any kind of name. O Shulamite. Why now? I already mentioned earlier, but in Hebrew, Solomon is Shelomo. The Shulamite, which could be the name of the place she comes from, Sunaim, Sunem, something like that, or a proper name, is Shulamit. And the word for peace in Hebrew is Shalom. It seems like the author is making a point of saying that Michael met Michelle. I don't have another word to describe that, and found mercy. Close, anyway. Shalomo, Shulamit, peace. Shalom. They've been reconciled. She's actually going to use the word shalom shortly after to say that she brought peace to her husband. That takes us now to the consummation. Once again, he describes her. But things are different. His description now is even more intimate as they now will consummate forgiveness together. Different than the insecurity and the fears and the lions and the leopards. He is much more bold, and so is she. Here's what it says. Notice 10 descriptions. How beautiful are your feet in sandals, O noble daughter. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a master hand. This doesn't maybe sound so great, but we need to understand what he's trying to say. Your navel is a rounded bowl that never lacks mixed wine. What he's saying is, you're my food and drink. Because he says your belly is a heap of wheat encircled with lilies. What he's saying is you satisfy me completely. You are my bread and butter. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower. Your eyes are pools in Heshbon by the gate of Bath Rabim. Your nose is like a tower of Lebanon, which looks toward Damascus. That doesn't work for us either. But we're situated in the center of the face. It's that idea of nobility. The neck reminds us of some African princesses. Maybe you've seen in National Geographic. But they're so stately and noble. Your head crowns you like Carmel. Carmel is that mountain range that towers over northern Israel, seen from a distance. Your flowing locks are like purple. They're precious, expensive. And then he's really good with words. A king is held captive in your tresses. How beautiful and pleasant you are, O loved one, with all your delights. He keeps going on, and it depends on how you understand some of these terms, but there's almost like he mixes metaphors. He is so intoxicated with her once again. And notice, on their wedding night, he had 7 descriptions of her beauty. Now he has 10. I mean, they just had a fight. But he's learned to see the beauty in character and appearance. Your stature is like a palm tree, and your breasts are like its clusters. Clusters are usually used for grapes. And then he's going to talk about apples. So he's got this huge mixture of fruits. She's like this fruit bowl for him. But it's also possible that it was a date palm, and date palms actually do have clusters. I say, I will climb the palm tree. I will lay hold of its fruit. Oh, may your breasts be like clusters of the vine, the scent of your breath like apples, and your mouth like the best wine. I mean, he's got every figure you can possibly imagine. And then the pronouns change. And she speaks. It goes down smoothly for my beloved, gliding over lips and teeth. You remember in Frozen when Elsa and remember when they complete each other's things?
Oh,
What-
very beginning.
Sandwiches.
Yeah. What's
Complete
the,
each other's sandwiches.
yeah, we what?
Finish each other's.
We finish each other's sandwiches. Well, in a much better way here, she's completing his thoughts, but it's that interchain of lovers that are totally satisfied with one another. And then we hear again. For the third and final time, her declaration, I am my beloved's. But what about, and my beloved is mine? But at this stage, she doesn't need to say anything. Little foxes, my beloved is mine, and not my beloved's. After the apathy, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. And now, in the final consummation of their relationship, it's enough. I am my beloved's. And something amazing enters in, because now she says, and his desire is for me. That word desire was only used 3 times in the Old Testament. And the first 2 times were in Genesis 3 and 4. And the first time was when God said to the woman, your desire will be against your husband. Oh, wow. Something has changed. The context and the person. His desire is for her. Instead of being an oppressive ruler, instead of being an insubmissive rebel, they become intertwined. And it seems like the author is subtly saying, the curse has been reversed. I am my beloved's. His desire is for me. The secret of a mature love is not so much to possess, but to belong. Faithfulness to marital vows, in and of itself, is already an incredible testimony. I am my beloved's, my beloved is mine. To the world and everyone around us. The commitment to take our relationship to the end. To return a soft answer. To not let the sun go down upon our wrath. All of that leads into the grand finale of the book. She is now much emboldened. She was timid before, passive in some sense. But now she invites her husband to a rendezvous. This is not inappropriate. There are times, even though husbands are to be much more the initiators, the leaders, there are times, and guys will appreciate this. She says, come, my beloved, Let us go out into the fields and lodge in the villages. Let us go out early to the vineyards and let's see whether the vines have budded. It's a third time. Let's see if it's springtime again in our relationship. And the pomegranates are in love. And then with a wink, she says to him, I'll give you my love there. Verse 13 might be a little confusing to us because she says, the mandrakes give forth fragrance. If you remember way back in Genesis 30, Reuben. Okay, now I gotta remember the story. Help me here.
Finds mandrakes.
Reuben found mandrakes, showed them to his mother, Leah. Leah offers them to Rachel because the mandrake was considered an aphrodisiac, like I said. This is a mandrake. For different reasons, both masculine and feminine. Its actual format looks like a human being, legs, arms, and everything else. It was considered a stimulant for lovemaking. And she winks and says, the mandrakes give forth fragrance, and beside our doors are all choice fruits, new as well as old, which I have laid up for you, O my beloved. They need time away, like every couple does. It's hard sometimes with little kids, don't have family nearby. Who's going to take care of the kids? Who's going to do all of those things? Just a side note. The love she offers is new and old. It's not exotically erotic. All sorts of new, crazy, weird things that somebody watched in a pornographic movie. Don't do that. It's the old, that which you know makes her or him happy. But there's a little spice too. New as well as old in the context. Conflict, which is resolved through patience and forgiveness, matures and deepens the relationship. It is possible for a couple to come out of a crisis better than when they entered. If it wasn't for that, we would never counsel couples. And so now we come to the end. I have 5 minutes. And I'm going to go ahead really fast here. I'm just going to give you a grid to understand chapter 8. Chapter 8, like one author describes it, is like a toy that I played with when I was a kid, a kaleidoscope. I'm not sure how many have ever messed with a kaleidoscope. You've got a quadrant with some colored glass and some mirrors, and the more you turn it, you get symmetry in the 4 quadrants, and it makes beautiful designs. The last chapter of the book is something like that. We get this potpourri of photos, a montage, collage at the end of the book. One after the other. I'm going to read them and we're going to be finished. I'll explain really quick. A lifetime to love is too little. That's the first vignette, the first picture, the first kaleidoscopic view. Oh, that you are like a brother to me who nursed at my mother's breast. If I found you outside, I would kiss you and none would despise me. I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother, she who used to teach me. I would give you spiced wine to drink, the juice of my pomegranate. His left hand is under my head and his right hand embraces me. The first little episode, flash that we get, she said, love is so good. This was everything I hoped for. I just wish it could have started earlier. But then it occurs to her, whoa, that's the opposite of the message we've been transmitting. And this is the last time the refrain of patience comes in. Except now it's a mature woman who has just said, oh, I wish we could have started earlier, but it was good that we waited. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, in your case, just like it was in mine, don't stir up or awaken love until it pleases. It's so good, but it is good because of patience and purity. Second, what people call a vignette, little episode, Instagram photo. Somebody says, who is that coming up from the wilderness leaning on her beloved? The idea is, what people see is that two have become one. That's the testimony of this couple. And then she looks back and says to him, it was under the apple tree that I awakened you. We've seen the apple tree several times throughout the book. There your mother was in labor with you, though there she who bore you was in labor. It's a recollection of the joy and the pain. It seems like this place where they had their first encounter was a place where his own mother, Bathsheba, bore him. Not an uncommon thing in that culture to have babies under trees. But then, the central theme of the book. She also has the privilege of announcing the theme. She says this, "Oh, set me as a seal upon your heart." The seal was this signet worn around the neck. It was a mark of possession, of authenticity. It was the most treasured possession that a ruler had, or a man had. She wants to be that treasured possession on the heart, his emotions, on his arms, his strength. For love is strong as death, jealousy fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord, or intense flames. That's where that yacht comes in, we saw the first night. Many waters cannot quench love. If it's true love, it perseveres. Neither can floods drown it. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised. I'll have to go past this here. And we then get the recollection from her brothers. Half-brothers, probably. I already mentioned this. We have a little sister. She has no breast. This is a retrospective look, a flashback. It's interesting at the chapter 8, all of the key people in the whole book reappear. That would be something, Hannah, like a drama, where at the end, you present the play and then all of the characters come out. What shall we do for a sister on the day when she's spoken? If she is a wall, we will build a battlement of silver. We'll honor her. If she is a door, we will enclose her with boards of cedar. We'll protect her. She says, I was a wall. My breasts were like towers. Then I was in his eyes as one who finds or brings shalom. Because of that, Shalomo found shalom in the shulam. Give me 2 more minutes? You good? I don't know. The guy who's preaching tomorrow is going to maybe get... Oh, that's me, so it's okay. And the daughter of our youngest...
The wedding.
At the wedding. What did I say? I'm getting all confused here. This is so emotional to me. Her 3 brothers, our youngest, a couple years ago, Daniel in his military regalia brought in the symbol of the protection that they and we had ministered in the life of their sister. It was a symbol of her purity. It was a key to her heart that she had worn in a locket around her neck for many years, and that was then presented to the groom. Symbolizing in part this whole passage and also the importance that the family has and also the church has in protecting our young people. Well, the passage ends here. Verses 11 and 12, it looks like it's a recollection. These two met in the most unexpected way. It really was a Cinderella story. Solomon has this vineyard in the northern part of Israel. He rented it out, and he comes to inspect the fruits and collect his wages. And it explains at the end how that took place. Solomon had a vineyard at Baal Hamon. He let out the vineyard to keepers. Each one was to bring for its fruit 1,000 pieces of silver. But now she says, she was the vineyard, my very own, is before me. You, O Solomon, have the 1,000. And the keepers of the fruit, probably her brothers, who would be honored because they protected her, they get their 200 as well. And here's the last 2 verses. Now, this is really cool. I won't say it's the best for last, but the last 2 verses are an amazing reversal of what often happens in married couples who don't persevere in first love. Verse 13, he speaks. O you who dwell in the gardens, his wife, with companions listening for your voice. That was said earlier too. Let me hear it. He just wants to talk to her. He wants to hear her heart. He wants to have sofa time. He wants to go on a retreat, a conference for couples. He wants to talk just like when they were engaged. But she's had enough of talk. Verse 14, the book ends like this. Make haste. Now you can run. My beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. He wants to make talk. She wants to make love. And the roles are reversed, and true love continues. Patience, purity, perseverance. That is the Song of Solomon. Tomorrow, we're shifting gears. And I'm not going to tell you what we're doing tomorrow because I got to prepare something tonight.
All right. Okay. Thank you. That's everything. If there's some guys that can help us move the piano upstairs. Other than that, take whatever snacks you want to because we're done. And we're not using them tomorrow. Yeah, thank you. And my dad's email is at the end. Unlike me, they are good at responding to emails. So if you have questions or things, you can go there. So.